We're live, Mr. Chair.
Okay, everybody, welcome to Senate Transportation. Let's go ahead and do a roll call.
Senator Brennan? Here. Senator Furphy?
Excused.
Senator Kolb?
Present.
Senator Pappas?
Here.
Chairman Boner?
Here. Okay, looks like we're ready to go. First up, we have Senate File 113, light and high profile vehicle closures 2. Welcome, Director. Good to see you, even if it's a little bit earlier than we expected. Feel free to go ahead and do an overview of this bill.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Committee. Darren Westby, Director of Wyoming Department of Transportation. Appreciate the opportunity to go through this bill with you today and appreciate the efforts to get it here today. So I know over the interim, we discussed a lot about the technology behind how we got here with the light and high profile vehicle, the weight-based closures, the study from the University of Wyoming. My team took that data and then put together algorithms in which we can make weight-based closures across the state, depending upon the weight load, super elevation, wind speed, wind direction. And so pretty proud of the team and what the science behind what they did to make that happen as fast as they were able to make it happen. As you recall in the testimony throughout the interim, the blowovers have been increasing over the time, the last several years. And so the impacts of the closures are not just the personal or the property damage that happens, but also the delay in the closures and what happens after the closure, how long it takes to get cleaned up and get the roads back open. So appreciate the efforts in making this bill happen. So, Mr. Chairman, if it's your pleasure, I can walk through the bill as drafted by LSO. Great. So on obviously page 1 is the bill summary. Flipping quickly to page 2, lines 10 through 11 modifies section 24.109, which is the highway closures. This provides for a misdemeanor and $750 fine for willfully failing to observe a sign, marker, warning, notice, or direction placed or given under Wyoming 24.108, which is the closing or restricting use. Lines 20 through 23 modifies that same statute, adds subsection D, which provides for a willfully violator of a light and high profile vehicle closure given under statute 21.108, which is the closing or restricting use again, is guilty of a misdemeanor. Then we continue on to page 3, lines 1 through 8, talk about the specific driver is liable for a $2,500 fine, specifies the driver may face imprisonment of no more than 30 days, specifies that convictions are considered reckless driving under 49 CFR 383.51. Line 22 modifies section 31.7.102, which is the driver's licenses definitions, and it modifies that section of serious traffic violations, and just at the end just strikes the or. Going on to page 4, line 5, again, modifying this section with the striking the or. Line 7 on that same page, we're adding subsection K to the definition for the serious traffic violation. Lines 17 through 23 modifies section 31.7.127 for the mandatory revocation of license for certain violations, which adds the subsection Romanet A8, which requires mandatory revocation of license of a non-resident operating privilege upon conviction, specifies the driver must have previously convicted 2 or more times within a 5-year period. Page 5, lines 2 through 3, continued from page, yeah, continued from the previous page. Add subsection Romanet A, 8, capital A, specifies the 5-year period, precedes the date the offense occurred. Lines 5 adds subsection Romanet A, 8B, specifies that the 5-year period precedes the date of conviction. Lines 11 through 15 modifies 31.7.128, which is the driver's license mandatory suspension, and adds subsection O, Romanet O, which requires mandatory suspension of the license of non-resident operating privilege upon conviction. Line 17 adds subsection Romanet OI, which specifies the suspension of 90 days for the first conviction. Lines 19 through 22 adds subsection Romanet OII, which specifies the suspension of 6 months if previously convicted within the preceding 5-year period. Page 6, lines 1 through 2, continued from page 5, adds subsection Romanet OII, capital A, specifies that the 5-year period precedes the date of offense occurred. And line 4, adds subsection Romanet OIIB, which specifies the 5-year period precedes the date of conviction was issued. Then line 6 is the effective date, effective July 1, 2024. And Mr. Chairman, since the bill was drafted after the interim, there was some latitude given to LSO to be able to craft some conforming language to ensure that there is language appropriate in the bill, make sure it wasn't affecting other things. And so since the bill was drafted, Misty and the team have gone back through it to see if there's a more effective, efficient way with the bill. And if it's your pleasure, I can have her walk through a couple pretty minor discussion points that could cut this bill almost in half in length, but the effective is still where you want it.
Okay, we'll pause there, make sure we understand where we're at in terms of our intent. Any questions, committee, for the director? Okay, I have a few. So looking at the difference between resident and non-resident, that seems to be part of what the bill currently is. I want to make sure that the penalties are they same? Are they different for, depending on whether you're a resident or non-resident? It looks like we have slightly different standards potentially. I just want to verify in terms of the length of the suspension, especially for the first and second offense. What are the differences, if any, between a resident and non-resident?
Mr. Chairman, that is a little bit of the confusion, and I would probably turn it over to Misty to make sure that she can adequately answer that question.
Chairman Boner, members of the committee, my name is Misty Zimmerman. I am the Driver Services Program Manager for YDOT. One of the things that we identified early on in the review of this draft from LSO as the bill went out is that we wanted to ensure that just that happened, that all of the penalties were the same across the board, whether you were a commercial driver or a non-commercial driver. So a couple changes that we think that might be adequate or might be acceptable for the committee at your recommendation may address that concern for you.
Okay. Right now I'm just establishing what the bill does currently, so we're all on the same page, because these are going to be some, I think, important considerations. Senator Cole, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on page 5, the beginning of line 2A, and then 5, beginning of that B. I guess, could you explain to me why it has to be stated in these two different ways? The date of the offense upon which the conviction is based, or continues the date of the conviction at issue. So I guess my question is what, I guess, explain at issue, and maybe I just don't quite understand that technical term. If you could help me with that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Boner, Senator Kolb, when you start talking about the differences about offense date or conviction date, sometimes those are very different when it appears on a driver's record or when we get that conviction in from the court. So at the date of offense on which the conviction is based, or the date. And the way that our rules and regs are looked at, we usually base everything on the offense date of items. because you're looking at a look back when you have that look back for a certain period of time. So in the last, I believe this is 5 years. So it's either based on the offense date or the conviction date. And this is designating the ability to do either. And then we outline further in rule and reg on what each individual offense is taken by.
Go ahead.
A quick follow-up, not to belabor this, but I still don't understand. If you're gonna, you just told me you based it on the offense date, right? And I mean, I guess typically. So that was my question, is why do we have to have a separate B? I mean, what is that gonna cover us on? I mean, what is the benefit that improves the bill by having B? I mean, what is it gonna do for you as an agency? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And just to make sure I'm clear, so A is basically the day the accident happened, B is the day that they're convicted in court, is that correct? And what we have now is the ability for the department to choose either one through rules, but you would choose one or the other, is that correct? And feel free to answer Senator Cope's question too. I want to make sure I'm clear on that, so.
Chairman Boner, Senator Cole, that's exactly right. So we define by rule usually what types of offenses or what the penalty or the look back period is based on either the conviction date or the offense date. And we define that out in our rule. So when you look at something similar to our non-resident, or excuse me, our repeat offender law, that's based on offense date. So this statute does the same thing as the existing statute for reckless driving, and that's why I believe that it was mirrored to be exactly this way.
And so I think the Senator's question was, what's the benefit of doing it that way to us? I mean, why would we allow you the flexibility instead of just choosing one or the other?
Chairman Boner, Senator Cole, that would be a policy decision for you guys.
Quick follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm just very uncomfortable with rule-making authority, especially now I get into the middle of a statutory change and you're telling me, well, we'll fill in the blanks. And that's my, I guess, heartburn with this thing. I think for the public's sake, to be clear as possible, rulemaking seems to be, something that's always at issue at times. And so that's why I was asking. It's like, well, thank you, explain. I appreciate the explanation, but I really don't, I feel comfortable. I mean, I'll still support the bill, but I just don't feel comfortable with allowing an agency to make rules that are frankly unclear. Thank you. Mr.
Okay, cool. Any further questions? Or why not at this point? Okay, I just want to verify once again, mostly for review, that in 317127, that is, applies to anybody, not commercial, commercial, non-commercial alike. And same thing for the non-resident, it apply to anybody that's, potentially hauling a trailer on the back of their vehicle. Just want to make sure that's still the case.
Chairman Boner, yes, that is the case because of the non-resident operator policy. However, when we send this to another jurisdiction, Wyoming would be able to take that action because of the non-resident operator privilege. If we were to send this this conviction as it's written today, we wouldn't be able to tell another jurisdiction how they were to take effort on it, but we would be able to spend their non-resident operating privilege here in Wyoming.
Right, but there's no distinction between commercial and non-commercial. That was my question.
That's correct.
Okay, cool. All right, any further questions for the bill as it is? Okay, please proceed. Looks like you have some suggestions here.
Thank you, Chairman Boner. As we read this and as we talked through this through interim at length, we had a lot of discussion based on the fact of the comment you just made, making sure that the penalties were equal for both non-commercial, commercial, Wyoming and non-Wyoming residents. The bill, as it's written currently, defines a citation or a conviction under 24-1-109. It adds that to each of the mandatory suspension and revocations that are currently outlined in Wyoming statute. We added the portion, or LSO added the portion for the purposes of 49 CFR 3D351, the conviction under this subsection shall be deemed reckless driving. And I think that was talked about a lot about serious traffic violations and what the disqualification period for that is. We feel that potentially that there could run into some issues, as I mentioned earlier, that Wyoming has the authority to take the non-resident operating privilege suspension, but other jurisdictions may not have that same authority based on the fact that 24-1-109 isn't identified in what we call the AMBA code dictionary, which is the codes that we transport between states. So what I would potentially recommend, if it is the committee's pleasure, is when you look at page 3, lines 6 and 7, striking 49 CFR 38351 and inserting the words driver licensing action. And then on line 8, where it says shall be deemed, reckless driving, adding the word under 315229, that would give us the authority to send all convictions as a reckless driving, not only take the non-resident operator privilege for Wyoming, but also, and the actions that are outlined in statute for Wyoming residents, but also send that code that we have associated with reckless driving to all jurisdictions. And that would allow them, that would then eliminate the need for the remainder of the bill up through section 2.
Okay, so let's make sure I get the suggestion correct here. So on page 3, lines 6 and 7, strike the CFR reference and insert driver license actions. And then at the end of line 8, add the statutory reference, which was under 31-5-229,
which is the exist.
Okay,
Sorry.
cool. And then the other recommendation was to do what exactly? Or delete what else?
On page 3, lines 10 through 23. On page 4, the entire page. On page 5, the entire page. On page 6, lines 1 through 4.
Okay,
And Mr. Chairman, the reason for that is once you define that as reckless driving, all of those penalties are currently outlined in statute and match the existing proposal.
right. So statutory reference on line 8, eliminates the need for the remainder of the bill. Okay, cool. Thank you. I'll make sure we're all on the same page. All right. I like it better when it's engrossed, but that's, okay, cool. Thank you for that suggestion. And that ensures everything's consistent between in-state, out-of-state, and so we're good there. Okay. Any questions on that suggested amendment, committee? Okay, cool. Any further comments? Okay, cool, thank you. All right, let's go ahead and open up for any further public comment. Anybody wants to comment, come on down.
Mr. Chairman, Sheila Furch with the Wyoming Trucking Association. Excuse me, as you work through the interim, you heard from me several times on this, and you've talked about exactly what our concerns were. We just want to make sure that what this applies to is commercial, non-commercial, in-state and out-of-state. Everybody's treated fairly. My members have continued to take a look at the bill. We're comfortable with it. Some feel the fine's a little high, some are fine with the fine. So we've just really not taken a position on the fine. We understand there has to be a big deterrent because we don't condone any driver going past a road closure sign. I do want to give a little plug for the new variable message sign program because we think it's working. And we've had a lot of comments on it. And people are comfortable with that. The drivers they understand what that message is. And I think it's going to make a difference. So I think hand in hand with this, we've got a pretty good program proposed. And other states have reached out to me as well because they struggle with this. The broad-based, lightweight, high-profile didn't mean anything to anybody. You know what? If you blew over, you were lightweight. So it's kind of helpful to be able to have the protocol that they're using on the variable message signs, really tightening that down and making it clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Been really proud of our department here. I think it's been excellent work. So thank you to the Department of Transportation. That's, I don't think we would feel comfortable moving forward with this bill if there wasn't a better attempt at communicating what exactly that meant. And so I appreciate the two-pronged effort here. So any questions for the Truckers Association? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Kelly Little. I'm with the Associated General Contractors of Wyoming. Similarly to the previous speaker, my members are generally okay with the gist of this bill. Obviously, safety is the number one priority for us, and we understand and appreciate this committee's trying to resolve a real problem. I think there has been some progress made with the nomenclature on the signs. We were really concerned in the interim about the ambiguity of the definition of light and high profile. Obviously, it's still a work in progress. And the director did mention the different attributes that go into figuring out what is light and high profile. And that's not really, it's kind of a moving target. So can't really be stipulated in law or rule. So there's a little concern there. We just want to make sure that the law applies, consistently and equal across the board. And we're all aware that qualified CDL drivers are really hard to come by, and we just want to make sure that it's clear to those drivers that are doing that, doing that for a living, that this is clear to them. Other than those few things, we are supportive of the bill, and we just really want to give it to this committee to be curbing something that is a problem on our highways. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Okay, any questions, committee, for the contractors? No, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Any further public comment? All right, welcome, gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman, Committee, Josh Walther, Lieutenant Colonel with the Wyoming Highway Patrol. It's an absolute pleasure to introduce the committee to our newly promoted captain of commercial carrier, Captain Ramsey. And I'll turn it over to Captain Ramsey.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time today. I'd just like to say that Wyoming Highway Patrol does not have any issues with the language within the proposed statute. Thank you for this. I'd also like to say that the Wyoming Highway Patrol, we always try to approach things in a two-prong approach, and that's education first before enforcement. And combined with what YDOT has done with the variable messaging signs, that has given us that opportunity. So appreciate your time, and I'll stand for questioning.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Any questions for the Highway Patrol? Hey, thanks. Congrats on the promotion, Captain. Okay. Any further public comment? Anybody online?
No, Mr. Chairman, no one's online.
Okay. Any further comment? Okay, looks like comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Chairman, I move the bill.
Okay, moved by Senator Pappas, second by Senator Brennan. Any discussion or amendments?
Chairman,
Go ahead, Senator Pappas.
I would like to move the suggestion that we just heard on page 3, line 6, striking the CFR reference, and I believe the words to replace it were driver's license actions. Licensing actions. Okay, thank you. And then at the end of the line 8, referencing 31.5.229. And then along with that, we strike the balance of the bill, except for line 6 on page 6.
Okay, very good. I suppose we still need that effective date, so.
Yeah.
Okay, any discussion on that amendment, committee? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. That motion carries. Any further discussion or amendments on the bill?
Call for the question.
Okay, just say really quick, there's one I want to ask YDOT about the $2,500 fine, since that is brought up. Feel free to come on down, or maybe Highway Patrol. I'm just wondering how that it kind of shakes out with the other fines and statute. Is that a little high, a little low? Just so we can be, I think that's going to come up on the floor, so we should probably be prepared. So anybody wants to take that one? I meant to ask it sooner, but I get distracted with the amendments. It happens easily enough, so.
Mr. Chairman, we were discussing the $2,500 fine. I guess I wasn't part of this prior and don't quite understand how that was brought up. It is quite a substantially higher than reckless driving or normal reckless driving bond amount.
And Mr. Chairman, I don't know that I have a whole lot to add there other than trying to remember the conversation during the interim of trying to ensure that this is a big enough stick to make sure that we can get compliance. And the interest of the amount of hours it takes and the safety and the security of not only the highway patrol, but everybody else that gets piled up behind them, it's significant to try to keep the roads open as quickly as possible.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I too recall the conversation. I mean, we have the $750 already on the books, right? And now we're putting the $2,500 just for passing that particular sign, that particular warning. And the intent was to make it a big stick, because as I recall the conversation, a lot of the companies would just take the risk, pay the fine, and just move on. And we didn't want that to happen. And so by placing the larger amount and actually saddling it, saddling the driver with it as well, I think is appropriate. And so certainly if it becomes an issue in the future, we could always lower it, but I think we need a big stick. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Just want to make sure we're prepared for that discussion. I imagine it's going to come our way when it hits the floor. So just so I understand, the normal reckless driving fine is $750, and the up to 30 days, is that the same? I'm sure nobody gets actually thrown in jail, but.
Getting a nod back there, though,
Okay.
that seems correct.
Okay, very good. Okay, just so we're ready. Okay,
And so,
go ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Pappas.
Certainly, if someone on the floor has an issue with it, they can bring an amendment, and we can discuss it if there needs to be a lower number. We certainly need the bill, and, if we want to discuss the number on the floor, I'm okay with that.
Makes sense. Okay, any further discussion on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, I'll leave some of our talking points that we have, just so you have it for the floor discussion.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Let's go and do a roll call.
Senate File 13. One moment, Mr. Chairman. Did you vote on the amendment?
We did. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Senator Brennan. Aye. Senator Furphy.
Aye.
Senator Cole.
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Chairman Boner.
Aye.
5 ayes.
Okay, do we have a volunteer? Somebody who hasn't carried one yet.
I'm on the bill.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it's your bill, I
my
guess.
bill.
Sure, okay. You got it. Okay, good to, we'll back you up.
Resurrection.
There you go. That's right. Yeah.
Resurrection.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We look forward to that discussion on the floor. Okay, next up, we have Senate File 16, and just for getting everybody up to date speed here, we did put some work into this over the interim, but if you notice the vote on introduction, there's one vote against, which I wouldn't normally worry about, but it happened to be from a member of our leadership who could just kind of hold up the bill. So I guess what we did is we sat down with Senator Hicks, the military department, state forestry, and the county commissioners, as well as members of the governor's office, to go ahead and explore the possibility of solving this problem through a budget amendment. And, the more I thought about it, the more I thought that was appropriate, considering we are dealing with how funds flow back and forth. That's fundamentally the problem that we're trying to solve. So, a budget amendment would, I think, be an appropriate vehicle as opposed to a full-on, piece of legislation that establishes a separate account. And if I could, take the risk of trying to explain what Senator Hicks's concern was, is that he wants a more, I guess, holistic discussion about all other state agencies other than the state lands, obviously, that own property. This could include game and fish, state parks, and make sure that if we're going to have a policy for one department, we should have a policy for everybody. So I think we came up with a decent solution, but we're here, and the members of the committee, I apologize to members of the public, we haven't quite published the budget amendment yet, but we want to make sure it's right first. We do have a draft amendment here for members of the committee, and it's been passed out to the affected agencies as well. So with that, if anybody wants to come up and explain what we came up with, more or less, and because I'll be honest, I was on the Ag Committee for 4 years. We didn't really deal with the, any sort of fire funding at all the same way they did in years prior. So I'll leave it to either the state forester or Mr. Smith, the military department, to explain what the amendment does, how it works, and either one of you feel free to take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Smith from the Wyoming Military Department. So as the members will recall during the interim, the problem was when we have fires that last longer than the first operational period, typically 8 hours, the responding fire agencies need to be reimbursed for their costs. That's a standard thing all over the state that certainly state forestry works on. We were trying to figure out a way to fund that when it happens on Camp Guernsey. Camp Guernsey being 82,000 acres, we have fires. We blow things up. That's what we do for military training. Fires are inevitable. We try very hard to suppress them and make sure they don't expand into a multi-day fire, but it does happen. So what the proposed bill did and what the amendment will do is basically set up a process for state forestry to take in reimbursement requests from responding fire agencies, pay it, but then we need to make forestry whole. So what the budget amendment does, if included in the budget, it modifies the governor's budget, who has some accounts that they can pull money from to reimburse state forestry for the reimbursement they're making to the fire agencies. So when you look at the proposed amendment, which I think is in front of you, we do have a couple of suggestions down in line 18 and in line 22. It talks about the governor may, for the biennium, reimburse fire suppression. We think that should be a shall instead of a may. And the same with line 22, which is subparagraph C1. It really should be the governor shall. And then when you move on to the second page, the backup for all this is the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account. Essentially, if forestry doesn't have enough money in their accounts, they can ask the governor to reimburse them from that account. And then the remainder of the footnote, make sure we're not double reimbursing is what sub 4 does. Subparagraph D specifies it's not to exceed the actual cost of suppressing the fire. Again, state forestry does this all the time. And then that's essentially what the footnote does. As you'll recall, as the chairman described, Senate File 16 was our attempt to do the same thing by creating a separate account, put $2 million in it, that we could then work with forestry, they'd reimburse, then forestry could send the bill essentially in the military department to go against the account. The footnote essentially just directs it a different place without creating a separate account. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for your questions.
Okay, any questions? Okay, appreciate that. And just want to make sure, so your recommendations are basically changing the mays to a shall on lines 18, 22, and 26 of page 1 of the amendment. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is the stopgap. It has to be done, otherwise people are not getting reimbursed.
Right.
And as the committee will remember, the county fire marshals and other agencies are very concerned about being reimbursed quickly because they simply don't have budget space to not be reimbursed quickly.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Senator.
Are we not including the may on line 8 of page 2? I'm thinking that's different, but I just want to check.
I think you might be working from a different, yeah, sorry.
Oh, do I have the wrong one?
Sorry.
Oh, I don't have the right one.
Yeah, that's the updated one that
Sorry.
just passed out.
I
So.
apologize.
And Mr. Chairman, in subparagraph 3 at the top of the revised draft footnote on page 2, there is the governor may borrow funds from the LSRA. So that may is because he can take it from wherever he needs to. The previous mays were, he has to find some way to reimburse, which is why we wanted that to be shall.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 1, I guess, line 18, under C, it specifies 2025 and 2026. So we're going to come back here, I guess, every biennium and update this. That was my question. Is that just the way it's going to be?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, I'll apologize for my ignorance. My understanding is footnotes to the budget will continue on to the next biennium, but they have to be approved again.
Okay.
So the intent is this would never go away, this permission for the governor to use money to reimburse forestry for these kind of costs. But my understanding from LSO is that this is the way you do it, and it'll go back into the next biennial budget as an existing footnote.
Thank you, Mr.
And it's entirely possible that another committee will take this up in the interim to take that holistic approach to, making sure any state agency other than state lands can, not run the same problem. So we'll see. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I also am going to recommend an amendment, which is to remove the portion out of II under C. And that is because the whole point of why we are here is because the emergency fire suppression account is only for state trust lands as well as for our counties. And so we don't have the authority to pay the military yet for that. And as you just brought up, there may be an interim or some other time for us to work into that, but this would not be the account that we would need to be reimbursed out of for the 537. It would be the account that's listed in the III, which is the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account.
I appreciate that. And so was there another, like a governor's emergency fund that we were discussing, and I'd have to be familiarized with what that is.
Mr. Chairman, in the Wyoming statutes 9-2-1014.3 is the governor's public welfare emergency account, which has $10 million in it. It was established back in 2021, I think. And that was one of the accounts that could certainly be used if the legislature so chose. It's for public welfare emergencies. It is defined within 1002, that public welfare emergencies are sudden financial calamities or other occurrence not foreseeable or predictable at the time of the adoption of the budget that demands immediate action to ensure proper functioning or to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. So I'm not an expert and I can't speak for the governor's office, but that is another account that we discussed yesterday, I thought.
Okay. And so do we have any understanding what those funds are currently used for? And maybe that's a question for the governor's office, but.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Erica Legursky, Senior Policy Advisor for Governor Gordon. Are you talking about, which account were you talking about?
It's the governor's public welfare emergency fund.
So right now, this was something that was new a couple of years ago, the Public Welfare Emergency Account. It's $10 million that replenishes annually. And so the governor would have the ability to, if there was an unforeseen circumstance that came up, it kind of would come up during some of the COVID conversations, that if there were some things that the governor needed additional funding for and the legislature wasn't in session, he could approve those funds. We do have to send B11 and documentation to the legislature prior to using any of those funds. Right now, we have not exercised those, but those are available for him. We don't quite yet have, if you will, strict policies and procedures in place as to what that can be used for, just because we don't want to limit ourselves if there should be some sort of public welfare emergency. It can be health, it can be economic. Those are the types of things that are listed in the policy as of right now.
Okay, and so is your understanding that fire would be covered under this definition, that you could, without this footnote, you could still access it if you felt the need for reimbursements for fires?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that we could.
Okay. Sarah?
Mr. Chairman, would it be, would it add clarity to remove the emergency fire suppression account and just state that here, just for clarity? I don't think that, I think that would be good. But I'll
Mr. Chairman, I think
defer
that
to the governor's office.
I think that we can. One of the conversations that we've had, particularly with fires, is there are some fires, some funds that are designated towards fires specifically. And so this one is just one of those ones that's kind of outside of that, if you will, is where we were trying to originally to see if we couldn't be part of that fire suppression account. This is a backup to that, but that is one of the things that I think it could be used for that. But I do think that our concern was just making sure that we did have a designated pot of money for those fires that were on those military lands, just because we know that they will happen. And so that was one of our main concerns, is just making sure that the counties, that we did have something that that was designated for that, because we could put in, not saying that this would happen, but we could have a governor or a legislative body at the time that would say, we're not going to use this for fires, or that there is something else that's going on, and just wanting to make sure that, since we know that there probably are going to be fires in that area, wanting to make sure that those counties are reimbursed and have that, if you will, kind of dedicated funding source.
And so, yeah, one of the other suggestions was, and I agree, we need to strike emergency fire suppression account and include the governor's public welfare emergencies fund. But it makes me wonder about the other suggestion to change the may to a shall. Are we running the risk of just, instead of, taking all the county's funds, we're taking whoever else may use that fund and just shifting the problem to whoever that may be? I understand it's relatively new. We haven't defined who that is, but I wonder if we just might keep that may around in some paragraph 2 if we proceed forward.
Chairman?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that. Leave the two, change the first 2 mays, but leave that third may alone.
Okay. And the third may is for the borrowing, is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
It's for subparagraph 2. So
Subparagraph
it
2,
would apply
okay.
to the, if we do make that change, the governor's public welfare emergencies fund, we don't want to necessarily require the governor to take out and potentially, drain a significant amount out of that fund. And once again, it was just, supplanting a problem for the counties with a problem for somebody else, so whoever that may be, so.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, we're going to use the 537 and so this is just making us whole again with this pot of money. And so if it takes a B11, if it takes a little bit of a process to access those funds to make us whole again, the point of us coming in and helping using the 537 account is for us to make sure that the counties are getting paid when they need to get paid, as well as the private contractors. Thank you.
Okay, we're rapidly running out of time to the time we get you back on the floor, so appreciate the input. I think we got a pretty good idea of the path forward, and certainly the committee does not need to take any official action on this just yet, but did want to have a public discussion, kind of hash through what this should look like. And so that being said, is there any public comment on this general topic? Is there anybody online? Okay. Okay, so to summarize, make sure, and we can have just sort of an informal discussion based off this new amendment we have before us, the one without the staple in it. That helps the committee. On page 1, line 11, strike may, insert shall. Line 22, strike may, insert shall. Line 27, 28, remove the reference to emergency fire suppression account created by Wyoming Statute 36-1-402A, and insert the governor's public welfare emergencies fund with the appropriate statutory reference. And that'd be it. Okay, so clear as mud. Okay, so I prefer we just hold this bill back in case we need it. We'll see how things go, on the floor on Monday with the budget amendment, and certainly we have the bill as a backup if we need it, but I can't imagine it's being too controversial, but you never know. So, okay, any further questions or discussions on this topic? Okay, thanks, everybody.